He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to around with the United States. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
The Marine Expeditionary Units, the Muse and the Iwo Jima group, that gives images back to the Second World War and the island hopping that there was in the Pacific, trying to defeat the Japanese. The Marine Expedition Units are very capable units. They come as a complete package. So they've got naval support, they deploy off ships, they've got armored vehicles that they can take on shore, supported by attack helicopters, supported by fixed-wing aircraft, and they can sustain themselves for a relatively short period of time. And therefore they can be used to create a bridgehead for other troops to go through. The overall US buildup that there is in the region is significant. We're seeing 10,000 plus troops deployed in Puerto Rico, US Virgin Islands, Cuba. There's a lot of naval ships, at least 12 US naval ships, including different landing ships and support ships. We've seen B-52 bombers and of course the latest F-35B fighters and fighter bombers deployed into the region, as well as some interesting other funny bits of kit like the AC-130J Ghost Riders and lots of special forces, drones, helicopters, radars, and everything else coming in. It's all been controlled by this Marine Expeditionary Force. So it fits into an exercise scenario that the Americans would do in carrying out a landing operation into a neighboring country where it's being destabilized to try and bring a military capability in to stabilize it. Of course, all of this can be supported strategically from the US mainland by its airborne forces being dropped in at fairly short notice. So you can enhance that capability quite dramatically, very, very quickly indeed. And the Americans are one of the few countries around the world that could do it. So are they going to do it? What's it doing at the minute? Well, at the minute, it is posturing, it's gesturing, and it's sending a message. It's sending a message to Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan president, that that he needs to sit up and listen to what Donald Trump is asking for. And Donald Trump wants him to bring in democracy back again, but also to stop his actions of moving people out of the country and forcing them to go into this refugee chain that is, Donald Trump's word says, is invading southern United States, and wants him to start to deal with the drug problem, because Venezuela should be one of the wealthiest and highest living standard countries in the world. It's got the largest known oil reserve in the world, and that is just being squandered away by a leader who is letting all of this criminal activity go on in the background. Yeah, it's not unusual that you find Reaper drones being deployed into forward bases as part of exercises, because that trains their troops in being able to take the capability, the maintenance, the logistics support and all the rest of it, and put it into field conditions. So that in itself isn't something that I find unusual. However, they are a very powerful capability, and they have got two roles. The first role is what's called ISR, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They can watch what is going on. They can loiter over a target for a long period of time. They've got fantastic camera capabilities on them, both in straight optical capability, but also kind of thermal cameras built into them. And of course, there are different packages, sensor packages you can put on. So there are signals intelligence packages as well that can be put onto the Reaper drones. So that's all about gathering as much information as possible. The second thing that they have got the ability to do is to carry out strike operations. So you can hang weapons off the Reaper drones and different missiles that can be used for effect, whether they be anti-ship capability, whether they be anti-tank capability, whether they be missiles that can go air to ground. And you can put an electronic warfare package on them, so you can use them to jam the signals of anyone that you want to do. So you can jam something, listen into something else. You can destroy something while you're watching what another reaction is, if you've got a fleet of these drones with different sensor and action packages on them. If a country had been destabilized, and therefore not necessarily saying the Americans go and destabilize it. However, if we look at US history, back into the 50s, 60s, 70s, the US had a history of destabilizing different governments around in South America to try and set the conditions for regime change, to try and influence a more friendly, US-friendly government coming into place. And of course, we've seen similar things happen where the US have actually invaded a Central American country, invaded Panama, to overthrow a government that they felt was not supporting US interests. But that invasion only lasted a few days before they then withdrew. So the Americans have got a history of dealing with things that they see in their backyard using covert techniques and aggressive techniques. And those covert techniques range from everything from supporting opposition parties through to, as we've seen in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that whether this would go on today or not, I don't know, but targeted assassinations through to almost terror type activity in setting the conditions for the people to rise up against the regime that's there. Now, there's no indications that that's going on at the moment. If covert CIA activity and other intelligence agency activity inside Venezuela would be limited to probably support of opposition parties and seeing what it is that they would need to try and form a legitimate government and to legitimately try and overthrow the government that most people see has illegitimately stayed in place for so long, and to look at other issues that may affect US involvement. So to reconnaissance and carry out surveillance on different areas, different individuals, look at airports, look at ports, look at capabilities, look at things that could be used should the Americans need to put troops on the ground, identify your landing sites for airborne forces and everything else. It's all the sort of stuff that intelligence agencies backed by special forces would do as from a normal perspective anyway. So what would I be looking out for? I'd be looking out for an unusual buildup of troops. We're seeing that already in different areas that can influence a unified command and control structure. We're seeing that already through the U.S. Joint Task Force with its Marine Expeditionary Force. I'd be looking for unusual logistic outloads going with the forces that they're deploying. That would be more than the logistic outloads that you'd have for exercises for maneuvers. So in exercise maneuvers, you don't expect there to be massive casualties. There's a potential if you're carrying out active military action, you're looking for is the potential for casualties. So I'd look for medical logistics being outloaded, proper hospitals filled with doctors and nurses and not people who are just planning it off a piece of paper and doing a map exercise. The outloading of blood and drugs and other things that are perishable, because again, that's something that you wouldn't ordinarily take on exercise. And I'd look at an increased readiness of the likes of airborne forces, 82nd Airborne Division or the like in continental United States, and the pre-positioning of the aircraft and everything else that they would need. And then just before anything happened, there'd be a massive uptick in surveillance. However, the majority of that is probably going to happen in a way that people wouldn't ordinarily notice, i.e. from outside the Earth's atmosphere, from satellites in space. But it will be supplemented by what the ships are seeing with their massive capabilities and their radars. And we talked about the drones earlier, what the drones and other fixed-wing aircraft are seeing. We're seeing a build-up in a pattern, but that is all being billed as an exercise, as a training activity. That is, in many different wartime scenarios or conflict scenarios, running an exercise is a precursor to a real operation. It doesn't mean that it's going to turn into one, but it's a good way of building capability up and building your activity up, and not giving everything away.